Hey man, hey, I'm gonna jump right in. I got something right off the top of my head, and I wanted to throw it out there, and let's see where it goes. So, you know, obviously there's a lot of effort, energy being placed in the development of artificial intelligence. Companies that are leveraging AI, like OpenAI and Google and Microsoft, everybody's got their own little tool. And the debate of how do we responsibly advance AI is, I think, at an all-time high, because I think there's lots of concerns and lots of questions on whether we are developing AI responsibly. And when I think about the debate, I'm trying to balance two key points. One is, how do we continue to lead the world in the advancement of AI in a safe way and not end up over-regulating or overburdening moral and ethical responsibilities that others may not be introducing into their development in other parts of the world, and then we don't win the race to develop the whatever advancement of AI in the most effective way, and then of course get the capital gains associated with us having the best AI technology in the world. And I want us to develop it safely. I want us to have a global alliance of guardrails that allow us to develop AI responsibly. But that is going to require so much time and effort that if we wait for anything like that, again, we potentially run the risk of losing the race, losing the AI development race. So I don't know. I'll throw it back to you, Bud. Like, what do you think? Like, how what is the right balance between regulating, developing things morally and ethically versus losing an AI race to, let's say, other parts of the world and other governments where they may not have restrictions or there may not have concerns of restrictions or morality like what I think we do in America.
Yeah, no, that is a great point. I can almost guarantee that there are countries out there that have probably very few moral quandaries than we do, right? Just yeah. But what do we do about that? I mean, I think there is a balance to be struck. Um, the the Pandora's box is open, right? It's out there. The technology is out there. Anyone can develop artificial intelligence. It's just a matter of having enough compute power and enough energy to run it. So, and I'm sure every country out there or every superpower out there is working on it right now. So, yeah, I think we have to have a light touch when it comes to regulation. I don't think we have a choice really because you said it right. These other countries are going to be developing it and they're going to beat us. I mean, and it's not to be all doom and gloom about it, but it could be another our like nuclear race, like it was back in during the Cold War, right? And the consequences maybe wouldn't be as bad as a nuclear war, but it could still be pretty damn bad, right? And yeah, it's really we got into this with our nuclear war discussion, and how that all played out, and it could play out in a similar way here. And I think we have to err on the side of, yeah, we have to kind of win this race, right?
I agree. I don't like my and I think this is where, like, when I think about like my soapbox of the only way to rein in capitalism is morality, ethics, and regulation, I feel very strongly that we have to lean on morality and ethics in the AI race. I don't think we need to lean on regulation at this time. And I think we do need a an international agreement on the advancement of AI, similar to what we needed in like nuclear arms treaties as we were developing nuclear weapons, so that we don't have mutually assured self-destruction of our civilization. And like, what other development in our lifetime is analogous in any more deep rooted, fundamental, foundational way than AI and to nuclear weapons, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a deep connection there on the societal civilization, like the harm to our species that is at the same rate as the harm to our species of a nuclear war. And so there's lessons to be learned from what we did with managing the development of nuclear weapons that allowed us to still stay around as a species, maybe barely, but we made it. We're still here. And like, let's not get that close to it again. Let's not have a Bay of Pigs, right? Like, let's not have
Mhm.
a Cuban Missile Crisis, right? Like, let's like not have this type of risk um, as we're developing this technology internationally.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think some kind of analog to, nuclear arms treaty is a good one. And there's always the only argument to be made against that is that there still might be rogue powers out there that won't follow that, but, um, that's a risk no matter what, right? So if we can get as many nations to sign on to something like that and, you know, have some kind of moral framework around artificial intelligence, I think that can only benefit us in the long term. But yeah, it's a tough road ahead, right? We're at the infancy of AI, and we already see the effects of it. Maybe not in the past 2 years that we've had ChatGPT, large language models, but I mean we've had bots crawling the internet, right? We've had
Hmm.
all these Russian bots infiltrating Facebook and Twitter and all these social media networks. And yeah, we've already seen the effects of what that can do for society and for kind of general public discourse. It's disastrous, right? It can be disastrous in terms of misinformation and spreading misinformation. So, yeah, that's just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately, of what can go wrong. So, yeah, we definitely need something, but I don't think handcuffing our AI companies is the answer. I think we have to let them do what they do, but hopefully put in some common sense frameworks where, wh- yeah, we just have to get other nations to kind of buy into it, right?
I think the leaders of AI development in our country need to form a coalition. They need to form, and I think capitalism supports this type of a coalition because, like, I don't know, I think of like the game of chess. Like, AI can be like a chessboard, and if you don't have some rules in place to play this game and some definition of like, okay, we're gonna have a board, and we're gonna have a couple of pawns, and then we're gonna have everybody to go play. Like, we're gonna have black and white squares. Like, I feel like the industry still needs some type of a framework where everybody agrees on some basic rules, some basic foundational principles that will reduce the risk of us like creating something that could destroy our species. I mean, we've never dealt with technology that can develop itself without human intervention. It's the first time in our existence of our species that we've created something now that doesn't require our input to further advance. Um, any other technology required our input to advance. So
Right.
there's like right out the gate, there's immediately new risk that we've never dealt with. And so I think that these leaders who understand this technology the best are the ones to highlight where those risk points are and to come together as an agreement, at least domestically to start with, and then hopefully internationally, um, on those basic principles, whether it's a kill switch or whatever, right? Like,
Mhm.
where, if it's the frickin', the laser holes that destroy the Death Star, like, like I don't know, like we need something to protect our species, and I feel like that cause alone would unite our leaders of the corporations in our country, and hopefully beyond, right? Like, hopefully others would also sign up for something like that. Maybe in my
Yeah, I mean,
optimistic view.
yeah, well, we have to start somewhere, and I think that is a good starting point. I think I don't know what would compel those leaders to do something like that, but I hope a sense of morality and a sense of ethics that we would want to prevent something like that would be a starting point. And there's always the argument that there might be a bad actor, but you can't just give up on something like that because of that, right? Like there'll always be something out of your control or something that you didn't think of. But you do have to start somewhere, and I think that would be a great starting point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even just the debate of like, should you open source? Like, how much do you open source? How much do you keep private? Even that foundational debate has, I think, you know, um, created factions within the AI
Mhm.
development community. I mean, just look at what happened with like, Elon and Sam Altman, right? Like there was a
Right.
significant disagreement on, open sourcing it. And then of course,
Oh
Sam
yeah.
went, over to Microsoft and, they kept it closed. And, Zuck has had his view on saying, hey, things should be open source. And like, even all of those, leaders are still,
Right.
to your point, like, kind of defining what they think their approach is. But I don't know. I do feel like they need to have some forum where they can get together and at least establish some, like you said, moral, ethical guardrails that everybody's going to agree to. We need a starting point of like just like a moral ethical code for AI, like the ethical responsible development of AI, something like that. Um, and that would make me feel better,
Yeah.
selfishly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the argument over open source versus keeping it closed. And I think I read just a day or two ago about the fact that Microsoft and OpenAI have hired arbitrator maybe or someone to renegotiate their agreement because OpenAI is restructuring itself to be less of a not. I think they were originally structured as a nonprofit with a for-profit arm, and now I think they're going full for-profit. And I think uh, because Microsoft invested so much money, I think like 13 billion or something, they're scheduled to get paid out before OpenAI can make money. But it goes to the larger question of if OpenAI, which you could argue is the largest player, right, in AI, if they're going closed and they're going for a profit, their original mission was to be open, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
called OpenAI.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
that begs the question: if Sam Altman is not willing to be open, then do we need a larger figure, public figure, to kind of compel them to come to some kind of agreement that would put some moral guardrails in?
Yeah. And is that even the critical factor of what will drive moral development of AI? Like how important is open versus closed in like from a, I guess, societal perspective of the responsible development of AI? Like can both exist, should both exist under a broader framework of moral and ethical ways in which you develop algorithms or develop intelligence or analyze data and make sure that AI doesn't do immoral or unethical choices. And just as humans, we make mistakes on our, like, it's a moving line, right? Like the way,
Mhm.
like, morality and ethics it evolves over time. I mean, it used to be acceptable for us to be entertained by watching humans fight to the death. Like we stopped that over time. Like we said, that's not a good idea. Like we value human life. Like we can be entertained and we accept violent sports. We accept boxing. That's
Mhm.
societally acceptable. We
Right.
accept MMA and UFC. We accept that. I mean, just literally two guys fighting in a cage and two gals fighting in a cage and, not to the death, but like that's societally acceptable. Should it be?
Right.
We accept football, people putting
Mhm.
their, like long-term health at risk at times for our entertainment. So like, I think I don't know what the right way to even infuse morality and ethics into the development of AI, given that it's always evolving. Like morality
Mhm.
and ethics evolves based on what we as a collective species put as a value of a human life and what we consider acceptable for our, I don't know what, entertainment. And that's just
Mhm.
one lever, but even our investment, our capital dollar allocation in healthcare. Like, if an AI algorithm gets engineered correctly or incorrectly, it may say, hey, the number one way to improve life is to, prevent Alzheimer's disease. And we take all of our resources to try to combat Alzheimer's disease, yet the likelihood of success is so low, we've like exhausted all our resources and we're dying from all these other diseases. I don't know. I know
Mhm.
I've gone on a tangent here, but my overall point being, like, what is the right structure that we need to put into place, and what are the right dimensions that we need to
Right.
consider to put in a framework for the responsible use of AI? And I'm sure there are some. I mean,
Yeah.
there's got to be people like, smarter than us thinking about this and also doing work on this. But um, I don't know. I'd like to see it more in mainstream. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I attended a great event a few months ago for PMI NYC chapter. It was a Women in AI Ethics, and there were two fantastic speakers. I was just thinking as you were talking through that we should have someone on who is an expert in ethics and AI, because I think it would be a fantastic discussion and probably a lot more informative if we had an expert on rather than just the two of us, just the two of
Let's
us
do it.
talking, right?
I love it.
So
That sounds
I will
awesome.
reach out.
That would be awesome.
But, no, but another thing I thought of as you were talking is, you know, there are a lot of, especially with intelligence, there's a lot of unintended consequences that could happen, right? I think back to science fiction. So I think I'm a big science fiction fan. So I've read a lot of like Isaac Asimov, and he was kind of the father of artificial intelligence in science fiction. I think he came up with the three laws of robotics and all that kind of stuff. And I always think back to his uh, series of short stories called I, Robot. And I know there's the Will Smith movie that was terrible, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the original stories. But the gist of those stories was that you know AI can seemingly go wrong, but for good reason, and it would make perfect sense to the AI of why it's doing something. For example, it goes back to the whole, like, even the trolley problem, right? Where would you kill one person to save three people, right? And
Yep.
really, even like in self-driving cars, that probably is, I'm guessing, something that they have to account for, right? Like, if you're driving towards three people and then the car has to make a decision to swerve and kill one person rather than three people, is that something it should do? And, uh, you know, it might make perfect sense to a computer or to an AI to do that. But ethically, I think we would agree that taking some action to harm a human being is probably the wrong thing to do. So it
Yeah.
brings up a lot of really interesting questions.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's no question about it, man. And I know, like, and here's maybe a teaser for like an upcoming episode, because I think at the end of the day, and this goes back to what you were saying about Isaac Asimov, like, you know, when, his principles were like, control of knowledge is the way in which we have the best hope for us to continue to survive as humanity. And so, like, what does it mean to control knowledge? And I think that's really at the heart of all of our AI development, is the access to the data and the generation of the data. And you and I have talked about how, like, we're now already at a point where AI is developing data at such a fast rate that it doesn't need as much training data, and the volume of created data is now intermingled with source data that we don't even know the difference in some
Right.
cases, right? So, like, that's already getting a little bit like, is that okay? Should we have a marker that shows this was computer generated, or like
Mhm.
this was derived, like metadata versus like input data? Um, like, that's the type of stuff that I feel like we need to kind of like hash out as an industry. Some like those types of principles. But I think the discussion related to what information is, what knowledge is, what truth is, like that ties very much into what you and I will continue to talk about with like this debate, because like a lot of interesting topics come up when we start thinking about, you know, what is information, what is truth, what is knowledge. Each one of those words has a lot of, kind of breadth and depth behind their definitions and are critical to, I think, the understanding. And then ultimately what I think you and I are talking about today, the kind of structuring of some guardrails for the, ethical development of AI. So I think
Yeah.
we can touch on those in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And just going back to your point about what is, human generated, like if you think back to, we've had LLMs for the past couple of years, and they were trained on human generated data. At some point, right, there's now so much uh, AI generated data content that at what point does it become just AI generated content being uh, used to create more AI generated content being used? Like it just becomes this recursive thing, right? Where what's stopping us from just having all AI generated content, not based on anything human, really? And that's why I think it's so important to keep. And I'm sure there's content firms out there that are doing it right that have no kind of boundaries, and they're just pumping out garbage. Which is why I think it is really important to have a human element. Yeah, you can have AI generate content for you, but if you're just taking that and spitting it out into the world, I think you're doing yourself a disservice and society a disservice. I think there needs to be a human element. I think I think it's incumbent upon you as a human being to read through it, make sure that it's accurate, and put a human touch into it. It just seems
Yeah.
so cold to just take something machine generated and just throw it out into the world without any kind of input um or screen, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely two sides to that for sure, because I'm sure there's use cases where, like, again, in a controlled environment where you feel like, all right, AI, just go crazy and like give me an output. Like, I can't figure out this scenario model because of so many diverse inputs into how this, you know, numerous types of cancer treatments should be fit together
Mm.
to have the highest likelihood of success for saving this person's life. Like, great. I put constraints in. I don't give a shit. Like, just go figure this out for me, AI. Go crazy.
Right.
Generate as
Mhm.
much data as you want. Like, I don't care. Like, just go. But at the same time, if I have one tiny little error in the data that I gave that AI model to come up with the right treatment plan for that patient, and that propagates on itself because I don't have a human QAing the algorithm or QAing the output, then I may kill this person.
Right.
So there's got to be that balance of where we're like, even where we put like rules in place to say, hey, this is a great use of AI, but like, how do we know we didn't give it bad input data that is going to have a detrimental outcome or a suboptimal insight? Like, you need some type of human um, verification, validation that the direction that you're going is in fact the most optimal direction or the right direction or the safest direction. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good point, man. Again, I don't know the answer. These are hard questions.
Yeah, and I think for the time being, there has to be that human element. And there's all this talk of AI and then AGI, right? Automated
Yeah,
artificial
general.
general intelligence,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah,
a whole nother topic. And maybe we'll get to the point where we won't need any human input. But for the time being, I think there needs to be that human element. At least that's the way I feel.
I agree. I agree with you
Um,
100%. I mean, even in my professional use cases, when I start thinking about the introduction of AI in my career and the professional work that I do, like it's about taking the burden of routine, boring, pain in the ass tasks that are not the best use of human time, automating those so that humans can focus on more value-added tasks. If there's automation that can be introduced to say like, hey, I just need to verify your name and date of birth. Like, okay, do I really need a human agent to verify your name and date of birth? Like, I have source data, I have your input data, I can translate your voice into data and verify that that's correct. Like, I'm okay with that being 95% accurate. Like, humans are
Mhm.
probably somewhere around that. Like, okay, great. Like 95% accurate is going to work for that use case. Now let's get to the main reason why you're calling and let me see how I can help you. Like I feel like that's how, at least for our lifetime, it's gonna be. I don't know, like you said, down the road, if we get to AGI, like for like more broader use cases, maybe we will in some in our lifetime. But um, I view it as another tool, right? Like I view it as
Right.
another tool that will enable further human flourishment. But there's still a lot of risk with it not turning out that way, and I think that's where like our conversations go very, very, logically too, to say, are we doing enough to make sure that AI does develop the way that you and I expect it to, where it complements human behavior and human interaction and human capabilities?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think I think that's just a starting point. I think we can definitely expand upon this in future episodes. But I did want to end by just saying that this whole discussion was prompted by a series that we're working on, uh, based on two books. One very recent, which is Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari. It's been in the news a lot, and I think he's been making the rounds on podcasts. And then an older book that I am just about finished reading, called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, which has been very illuminating. But we're seeing a lot of parallels between those two books in terms of The Righteous Mind is about moral psychology and the history of morality and ethics in human society. And then obviously, Harari's book is about AI and what the future of AI looks like, but also looking back at the history of morality and ethics. So, like I said, there's a lot of parallels between the two books. So, stay tuned. We're working on a multi-part series of episodes based on those two books, and I think that'll be a really interesting discussion.
Yeah, awesome. I agree. Hey, until next time, keep questioning everything.
Except this podcast.
All right. Talk to
All
you
right.
soon.
See you next
Later.
time.